Hi Bookflowers, it's Kristen. Welcome back and welcome to my reading wrap up for the month of July. July was a pretty interesting reading month. You can see some of the books that I've read here. So with having time off in July because I'm a teacher, I was able to read 7 books this month over a wide variety of genres. I'll tell you my star rating on them and a few thoughts. So without further ado, let's go. The first book that I finished is You Love Me by Caroline Kepnes. This is the 3rd book in the You series that's been going on about the crazy stalker named Joe. And basically he's just as stalker-like as ever in this book, only this time he's in love with a mom of a child. So lots more complications there. I gave this book 3 stars because it just does not live up to the first book. I don't think that any of them could at this point. Like the first You book was so spooky and so rare. And Joe's kind of calmed down a little bit in this book, so I couldn't give it any higher than 3. The next book that I read was Firekeepers Daughter by Angeline Boulley. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that I gave this book 5 stars. Also special points to it because it was the book we were reading for our Top Shelf Society pick, but I really enjoyed this book so much because it was just so unique. This book follows our main character, Donis, who's pulled between 2 worlds. The world of her father, which was on the Ojibwe reservation, and then just her hometown on her mom's side. And on top of all of that, she's going through a lot because her uncle has passed away. And so at the heart of this book, there's kind of a mystery regarding figuring out what happened to her uncle. And there's so much more that I can't go into, but basically there's this dark force. It's not fantastical, it's real, but this dark force that's kind of coming after the safety of everyone she loves, and she has to fight against it. And it's a beautiful, unique story that's so insightful and wonderfully written, and I love Donis with all my heart. She's this main character who's just so independent, and reading this book was a treat. So like I said, I gave it 5 stars, and the only thing I think could have been improved on was like the pacing in some areas. So overall, really great rating. The next book I read was For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten. That book I listened to as an audiobook. It's an adult fantasy, and I gave it 3 stars. For me, the book was really atmospheric. So like when it came to atmosphere, I gave the book a 10, but when it came to like plot and intrigue and pacing, I couldn't like give it more than a 3, just because to me, there were lots of like backstory scenes that I didn't find interesting. And even a lot of like the scenes with the main characters who I kind of liked didn't hold my attention. And so I just wasn't able to enjoy the book. I think a lot of times it felt like all atmosphere, and then like the conflict that was happening, it just felt really repetitive. Like they were fighting the same battles almost over and over the whole time. And like the only purpose of them was to give more atmosphere. I don't know, it seemed kind of hollow, but regardless, it was a sweet Beauty and the Beast inspired fantasy book, but not my favorite. The next book that I read was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, and this is the book that kind of started my fantasy kick. My friend Leanne posted that she had picked up like the 2nd book in the series, and it made me want to read the first one, and so I did, and now I'm obsessed with fantasy. I even wrote a fantasy like middle grade after reading this book, so very special and important book to me. This book follows the story of our main character who can travel through 4 different Londons, and there's kind of this dark magic that he has to take out of his London and return back to where it came from. Otherwise, horrible things are going to happen. I gave this book 4 stars, and once again, one of the big issues to me wasn't a big issue because it was 4 stars, but I felt like the pacing was off in some places. But the characters were supremely likable and the plot was phenomenal, and I was intrigued the whole time. The next book that I read this month was The Forest of Vanishing Stars by Kristen Harmel, a historical fiction World War II novel that was completely unique to any I'd read before. and the fact that in this book, our main character actually lives in a forest and helps Jews who are escaping the Nazis survive and remain hidden so that they're not harmed. And I thought the premise was really interesting. The atmosphere was phenomenal. But some of the pacing in parts was slow, and I just felt like it wasn't that 5-star read for me, but it definitely has its place as like a unique World War II historical fiction book. And then the final book that I read in July was The Project by Courtney Summers, the same author of Sadie. This book is a YA thriller, so it says. I'll go ahead and tell you that I gave this book 2 stars. But I liked it. It just, maybe I'm really dark and twisted. Like, looking at me, you wouldn't think so. But for me, this was not thrilling at all. It was slightly mysterious. I didn't find there to be much atmosphere. And I wasn't a particular fan of our main characters and their decisions. And also, I did not enjoy the pacing of this book, but I did enjoy the premise. I think I just wish it would have been like more scarier and like twisty and things like that. I found it to be a little predictable, but I still liked the premise. So I think I read about like 3,000 pages or so this month and 7 books. I feel like that's a really great reading month. It won't always be like this, I know, because August will be back to school, but hopefully I'll still be able to read a good bit every month. So let me know what you've been reading, and otherwise I'll speak to you very soon. Bye, bookflowers.